Reports have surfaced suggesting that the UK has failed to freeze some of the assets of top officials in the regime of former Egyptian leader Hosni Mubarak. The move targeting Mubarak and his inner circle was introduced in February last year after the leader stood down amid mass rallies. Joining us live now for more is investigative journalist Tony Gosling. Very good to see you there, Tony. Now, London is apparently demanding more evidence from Cairo before agreeing to freeze these assets. Is that a legitimate demand, and why does Cairo fail to provide these evidence?
Well, it's really good to see the BBC doing this report this evening. The important thing to remember here, though, is that the speed in which the assets were seized, both of Colonel Gaddafi in Libya and, of course, of the 100 million or so of President Assad in Syria, this money was seized by the British government in milliseconds. With Mubarak's money and his friends' money, it's 18 months down the line, and there's still letters going backwards and forwards between the British and Egyptian governments asking questions. We can't seize the money. Not only that, they have allowed companies to be set up by people who are supposed to be on the Egyptian sanctions list. Those companies have been allowed to continue trading. Those companies have been shut down with no questions asked. So I think the sort of hidden message in British foreign policy towards Egypt is that we don't actually really recognise this new regime. We're actually wedded to some of our business contacts in the previous old Mubarak regime.
Now, that was going to be my next question, actually, that what are the benefits for Britain in protecting some of the core cronies in the Mubarak regime by safeguarding all these fortunes?
Well, I think it's because there's too many business connections between the two. I mean, essentially, we're talking about hidden connections. That is to do with arms dealing. I mean, we had David Cameron, of course, did a big arms tour, selling tour of the Middle East during the Arab Spring. And let's not forget where this money came from in the first place, because we have in Britain at the moment a big privatisation programme going on, many of our state assets being sold off to friends of the leading Conservative Party, who are themselves are billionaires worth of cabinets. But those assets were seized over in Egypt by the Egyptian Mubarak's friends themselves. So it's really a privatisation scam of state assets that have been sold to individual friends of Mubarak, that where they got all this money. And the Egyptian people should have that money back straight away. And those business contacts, I'm afraid, between Britain and Egypt and the military-industrial complex over here that likes to sell arms to Egypt seem much more important than actually honouring their diplomatic commitments.
It's always interesting to see how when, governments seize or money, particularly in areas like this, where a lot of people do ask, what happens to that seized money after a while? And in this case, the Egyptian people do need that money back. They're trying to rebuild their country. I mean, is this inner circle we're accused of stealing of tens of thousands of billions of dollars? The UK has already frozen, as you said, 100 billion of this. What effects is this going to have vitally on the banking sector in general?
Well, I can tell you what happens when there's delays in the seizure. Like I say, we've got a complete contrast with certain countries, the way their assets are seized immediately. What happens is, when there are delays, the people move their assets around the world, hide them even further, even in just a couple of days. I mean, for example, in Switzerland, when these assets were seized in Switzerland, they were seized within 30 minutes to stop any of this stuff being moved around the planet. But the more important background to all of this is that British foreign policy, as it's talked about by people like William Hague and officially by people like David Cameron, is actually not necessary. And this is evidence that we're not actually doing what we say we're going to do. So where is this other kind of shadow foreign policy coming from? And I think that's in many ways exposed if you start looking at groups like the private club called the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Chatham House. This is funded by the very financial elites and also by the military-industrial complex, and incidentally by the BBC too. And these people from the Royal Institute for International Affairs and Chatham House are actually setting, to a large extent, through their organs, their papers like International Affairs, their magazine, what British foreign policy is. They have far much more clout than the Foreign Office, and they essentially tell people like William Hague what to do. So a lot of this is to do with who is actually setting this foreign policy, and that's why we've got a contrast between what we're hearing from Hague and Cameron and what's actually happening on the ground.
Right, let's leave it right there. Thank you very much, Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, giving us his opinion on that money that's still been frozen and hasn't been seized. Thank you very much.